welcome to another video. I thought I would do something kind of different today. I just thought it'd be kind of fun to take a song and kind of tell you things that I have noticed or learned or find interesting. I'm not saying that this is like everything you need to know about this song. These are just interesting things that I have heard or in either the music or with references in the song. And so the song that I thought we would do today is the song Puttin On the Ritz. Puttin On the Ritz is a song written by Irving Berlin. It was written in May of 1927 and was first published in 1929, so there were a couple years there. So Fred Astaire recorded it. If I recall correctly and from what I've read, he recorded it first. There's three people that I listened to sing this song, and this is how I kind of became interested in it and fascinated by it, was because I listened to three different singers. I'm not sure if there's more I'm sure there's more that have recorded this song, but the three that I listened to, they all sang different lyrics to the song. And I just found that very fascinating. So I started paying attention to that a little bit more. And it makes it very hard to try and sing the song though, because your mind kind of puts all three together into one. I think I'm finally starting to get it straightened out. It was used in another movie with Fred Astaire singing it. It was used in a movie before that with Clark Gable singing it, which I had never heard of. I'm gonna have to go look that up now because I didn't know Clark Gable could sing. The song was used in a movie with Fred Astaire singing it. It was called Blue Skies, and it was made in 1946, and at that time some of the lyrics were revised. Fred Astaire sing was Irving Berlin's original lyrics that he wrote in 1929, or 1927. The song didn't come out until 1929, so that was when it was copyrighted, so that's when it's considered. Anyways, but then Fred Astaire sang a newer version in the song in the movie Blue Skies, which came out in 1946. So here we have the lyrics of all three versions of the song that I have listened to. So when Irving Berlin wrote his original lyrics in 1927, then the song came out in 1929, Fred Astaire was the first one to record it, and that's the version that I listened to Fred Astaire sing, which I find interesting because Fred Astaire recorded it later on when he sang the song, the revised lyrics in the movie Blue Skies in 1946, but the version that I found of Fred Astaire singing it was with the original lyrics. And again, I'm not going to go into all the history behind what the lyrics mean and why they were changed, because I'm still doing some research into that, and there's a lot of historical controversy just like about what the lyrics mean. So I'm not going to go into that. And again, this isn't to tell you anything about why things are certain ways, but more just to point out the things that I find interesting in the song. And then if you're interested in learning more, go and do some research for yourself and read about it. So Fred Astaire's version that I listened to is with the original lyrics. Now, there's, as you can see, a big difference between Fred Astaire's and Bing Crosby's lyrics. One being that Fred Astaire sings, it's like a pre-chorus. The song is really only made up of a chorus. It doesn't have like an ABA pattern of like a verse, chorus, kind of a thing. And Bing Crosby's even less so. It's literally just, I guess what you could, like, is it a chorus? Is it a verse? It's just like one part that's repeated. The lyrics are distinctly different than the chorus from Fred Astaire's. Going from that though, the version that Mel Torme sings is so slightly different than Bing Crosby's. Again, it doesn't have that pre-chorus to it. That was only in the original song. But Mel Torme's lyrics, if you look, don't actually change until that third line, and it's only that line that's different. And then the last thing that I wanted to point out is in Mel Torme's version. I love Mel Torme, besides being a fantastic singer, and I love his style. He does such subtle things in his song, but to me, like, that's what makes music. Like, it's not necessarily all of the right notes and right rhythms and getting all the words right, but it's the musicality of it, and it's putting things in there that you don't necessarily notice on your first, fifth, 10th, even like 100th time listening to it, and then all of a sudden you'll hear something and you go, oh my gosh, that was like really genius. But it's so subtle, but it makes the song. And that thing is that if you listen to Mel Torme's version, in all the times from the beginning of the song all the way to right before the end, he sings Puttin on the Ritz. So without the G, as you can see, it has the apostrophe after it on Fred Astaire's version, Bing Crosby's version, because that's actually the name of the song. It is not Pudding on the Ritz, it's Puttin on the Ritz. And Mel Torme sings it that way several times, every time in the song, except I think it's the very last one, or it's near the last one, he says Puttin on the Ritz. It's just one of those very subtle things, but it just catches your ear, and you go, oh, that was really cool. I like stylistically where he put it and how he did it. You know, it just like to change it up slightly, and it sounds really cool. So let's talk a little bit about music now of these songs. One thing that I've always been fascinated with and listening to, because the music of the 1920s through the 50s, music changed a lot during that time. The 20s was still kind of hanging on to the old like barbershop quartet and stuff like that type of music. And so the lyrics were very simple, the phrasing was really simple, and they would just like have catchy tunes. And so I would say that it seems like for the most part the music and the tune was more important than the lyrics. In fact, there's another song that we won't be getting into, but the Andrews sisters sang, and there was a lot of controversy around their lyrics like 20-30 years after they recorded it, because at the time nobody cared about the lyrics. You couldn't even really understand what they were saying, and even the Andrews sisters said, like, we didn't really think that much about the lyrics because it was the tune that caught us, it was the rhythm of it, it was we just enjoyed singing it. So for that, it seems like the lyrics weren't as important, whereas nowadays with a lot of songs, the lyrics are just as important, if not more so, than the words. And a lot of people will put very meaningful things, or like they use it as a platform to convey a message or a belief that they have through their lyrics. And back then, that wasn't really a thing that was done. Coming off of that, when you listen to Fred Astaire's version, the music is a lot more simpler than Bing Crosby's or Mel Torme's, especially Mel Torme's. There's a big difference there. Let me just play part of Puttin' on the Ritz and pay special attention to the accompaniment behind Fred Astaire singing. Have you seen the well-to-do upon Lenox Avenue? On that famous... So I'm pretty sure that's about the extent of what the instruments behind him are going to be. I'm going to fast forward to another part of the song, get into it a little bit more, and see if in the chorus some more instruments are added. Yeah, so it's pretty much that. If you could pick out instruments, it's hard to from those old recordings, but all I heard was piano and brass. There was possibly a string bass in there, like maybe being played as a slap bass. It was in the intro, and then when he was tapping. But when he started singing, it got cut down to just the piano behind him. And as we compare to Mel Torme and Bing Crosby, we'll listen to Bing Crosby's together. I know Mel Torme's, it's very, very prominent. It was more percussion based, and the piano is technically, I think, a percussion instrument. I play piano. I don't know. I know it has strings in it, but a lot of people consider it a percussion instrument. But like the percussion I'm talking about is like you could hear the cymbals and the drums, and it was more percussion based. And listening to music through going into the 50s and 60s, you hear the drum being incorporated more and more until it's just very, very percussion based. Whereas with Fred Astaire, it was brass and piano, which makes sense because in the 30s into the early 40s was the big band era. So those brass instruments were very, very popular. And I know a lot of people don't really pay attention to this, but the next time you listen to, say, somebody like Glenn Miller, Artie Shaw, or who's like the most famous? Hold on, I can tell you his name. Starts with a B. Benny Goodman. Benny Goodman. So Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, Glenn Miller. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe Artie Shaw isn't so much big band. But even if you look, they're called the Benny Goodman Orchestra, the Glenn Miller Orchestra. A lot of them didn't necessarily have strings, but they weren't bands like we'd call them nowadays. So they had the brass instruments, but they didn't have drums. And I know somebody's probably going to point out Sing Sing Sing, which is like the most famous song from the 20s. But yes, it does have a drum in it. But even then, it's like one drum. It's not a drum set. It's not percussion instruments. And you might hear drums here and there, like one drum or something like that, here and there in songs. I'm not saying they were non-existent. They just weren't as popular. So when you get into music going towards the 30s, so into the 40s, and then all the way like until now, drums have become very, very popular. So you heard that being incorporated a little bit more. So that's just one thing you can pick out that's like a huge notable difference between the early 30s and, again, I don't know when Mel Torme recorded his because it's a revised, like, what do you call it when it's like been reprocessed into like a digital format? My mind's gone blank. But to like make it sound better. That's what it's been. And so I don't know when it was recorded. And the Wikipedia article did not tell me everybody who recorded it, so that wasn't very helpful either. But I do know that Mel Torme was a singer in the 50s and 60s, so that's not surprising. So let's listen to Bing Crosby. He's like right there in the middle, and let's listen to hear what his version. If I can say this better, let's listen to how Bing Crosby's is. Nope, that still doesn't. How do you say that? Instrumentated? Instrumentated? Is that a word? Let's listen to Bing Crosby.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits?
So it's a little bit better quality of a recording too, so it's easier to pick out those sounds. So what I was hearing sounded to be like there was some type of a percussion instrument in there, like maybe a marimba or a xylophone or something like that, along with your brass. And it had a much fuller sound, obviously. It was like it was only a few instruments behind Fred Astaire. It was a piano and a few pieces of brass. Whereas this sounds a little fuller. And yes, it did have a bit of drum behind it. In fact, I'm not even sure I heard drum, but I heard cymbals. So it just sounded like somebody tapping on a cymbal. But it was very subtle, and it blended together very well with the rest of the sound. So in that, he not only had the brass, I don't think he had a piano. I didn't hear a piano. He could have a piano, and it's just being kind of drowned out by the brass. But I didn't hear one. So he had the string bass, the brass, and he had some type of an instrument like a marimba or a xylophone, and then he had the percussion of like a cymbal. It may have been a drum set, but again, it was very, very subtle. So now to compare, let's listen to Mel Torme's version, and I won't even have to tell you. You'll hear it right away.
If you're blue, you don't know where to go to. Why don't you go where fashion sits? Puttin on the Ritz.
You can definitely hear right away it's percussion driven. It is a lot of percussion, and interestingly, I wasn't hearing brass, I was hearing reeds, so that sounded like a clarinet to me. I think getting into more with Mel Torme, that was more of a stylistic choice. With back, they were different genres back in the 40s, say like when Bing Crosby recorded his. So even though if you had like blues, jazz, soul, pop, musical theater, even the lines between them were rather blurred, so they often sounded rather similar because you a lot of times had the same composer writing all these different genres of songs. It wasn't right that they were writing for different genres, it was that they would write a song, but then everybody would want to sing it across these different genres. So like if you say you had Ella Fitzgerald sing a song and Dean Martin sing a song, well, Ella Fitzgerald had more jazz and a soul sound to her, more on the jazzy side, than Dean Martin did. But back then, the sounds of the instrumentation behind them were rather similar. There were slight variations, but they still sounded rather similar. Whereas today, like there's distinct variations between musical theater, jazz, blues, pop, rock, even. You know, now we have rock, and it's very distinct. And there are some people that cross over or like sit in between genres or combine different genres, but for the most part, each genre has a very distinct sound. So with Mel Torme, you're getting more into that, and I think for him, having it percussion driven was more of a stylistic choice. But again, so it is the times, but it's also him. But if it wasn't the time, then he wouldn't really have that choice unless he was very intuitive and was very progressive in his musicality. So all that being said, these are just some thoughts and things that I've picked out. I find it really interesting. I like doing this with a lot of songs that I listen to, but more so for a song like that because there were 3 people that sang it over like probably close to 40 years. And you can really hear the differences, not only with the lyrics and the references, but also with the instrumentation and the way they performed it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. Let me know if I missed something or if you have a song that you've done that with, and I would love to hear all about it. Leave me a comment, and I'll see you all later.